Sir, try to stay still. You've got a cut here.
Okay, it just stings a bit.
Is he going to be all
Staring
right?
back from the shadows, her world doesn't just tilt, it shatters. Lydia Heron's finger hovered over the screen, breath caught in her throat, as the pixels sharpened on a man she had spent 5 years trying to erase from her memory. That face, older, bearded, hair lighter, was unmistakable. Caleb, the same man who once pressed his thumbs into her windpipe until stars exploded behind her eyes, the same man whose rage had nearly cost her unborn child her life. Now he stood smiling behind her 5-year-old daughter in a sun-dappled campsite, one hand resting casually on Hazel's shoulder as though he belonged there. In that frozen second, Lydia understood a truth older than any courtroom. Evil does not always arrive with sirens and flashing lights. Sometimes it arrives wearing a friendly grin and a borrowed name, whispering family while sharpening its blade. The terror that seized her was not merely fear for Hazel's safety. It was the suffocating realization that the past is never truly buried. It waits patiently in the underbrush of our lives, ready to strike the moment we dare believe we have escaped it. Lydia's hands shook so violently the phone nearly slipped from her grasp. She forced herself to breathe. Slow inhale through the nose, long exhale through the mouth, a technique drilled into her during countless therapy sessions. Yet no breathing exercise could silence the screaming in her skull. He found us. He found her. He is here. She thought of Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz and wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Frankl had stood in freezing roll calls, watching friends die, yet he clung to the inner freedom to decide how he would respond. Lydia had read those words during the worst months of withdrawal, when the pills called to her like sirens, promising numbness in exchange for surrender. She had chosen to fight then. She had to choose again now. The Selfie arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a quiet Thursday. By 4:12 p.m. she was already in the car with Nick, engine roaring toward Trinity Pines Campground while her mind raced faster than the tires. Every mile marker felt like a countdown. She remembered the night Caleb was arrested, her swollen belly, the police lights painting the living room walls blue and red, the way he had screamed her name as they dragged him away in cuffs. Back then, she believed justice had finally arrived. 5 years later, she understood. Justice is not an event. It is a lifelong reckoning. Nick drove in tense silence, glancing at her every few minutes, sensing the storm behind her eyes, but not yet knowing its name. Lydia clutched the pill bottle in her purse like a talisman and a curse. She had been clean 4 months, 4 fragile, hard-won months, and already the old temptation whispered that 1/2 tablet would sharpen her thinking, make her strong enough to face whatever waited in those mountains. She resisted, but the war inside her was brutal. The road twisted through dense pine forest. Fog clung to the valleys like guilt that refuses to lift. When they reached the campground, chaos had already erupted. Police cruisers angled across the dirt road, yellow tape fluttering in the breeze, June and Charles sitting stunned at a picnic table while a paramedic pressed gauze to Charles's bleeding temple. Lydia's legs nearly buckled when she saw her in-laws' faces, pale, hollow, aged 10 years in a single afternoon. Charles recounted the story in halting sentences. A friendly couple, Collins and his sister Maya, who appeared 2 days earlier, offered to help with Hazel, told wonderful stories, grilled perfect burgers. Hazel adored them. Then, this morning, they vanished with the child in their van. Charles had chased the vehicle, been struck repeatedly, fallen. June had dialed 911 while tears streamed down her face. Lydia handed Detective Rollins the zoomed selfie. The officer's expression darkened as she compared it to the old booking photo Lydia pulled from her cloud storage. "We have reason to believe the suspect is Caleb Winters," Lydia said, voice cracking on the name. "My ex-husband. Hazel's biological father. He was released 6 months ago." The words hung heavy in the mountain air. Nick's hand found hers, squeezing hard, but she could feel his confusion. Why hadn't she told him sooner that she feared Caleb might come for Hazel? The answer was shame. Pure and corrosive. Shame that she had once loved that monster. Shame that she had been too broken to protect her own unborn child from his violence. Shame that parts of her past still felt like open wounds. As officers fanned out and rangers began searching trails, Lydia's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She stepped behind a towering white pine, heart hammering, and answered. Caleb's voice slid through the speaker like oil on water, calm, almost tender. She's laughing right now, Lydia. She likes the ice cream I bought her. Don't ruin this for her. In the background, Hazel giggled about Sprinkles. The sound was a knife twisting in Lydia's chest. He gave her instructions: Sunshine Cafe in Oak Ridge, come alone, bring Hazel's documents, or he would tell the world every secret she had buried. The embezzlement, the drugs during pregnancy, the nights she blacked out while Nick waited downstairs believing she was just tired. Lydia ended the call and vomited behind the tree, while burning her throat. When she returned to the group, she lied to Nick about the call being from work. The lie tasted worse than the vomit. She watched him drive away with his injured parents in the ambulance, then climbed into her own car and sat motionless for long minutes. The pill bottle rattled in her purse like a death rattle. She took half a tablet, then spat it out, furious at her weakness. She would face this monster sober, or not at all. The drive to Oak Ridge felt eternal. Every red light was torture. She rehearsed scenarios: negotiation, escape, violence. None felt survivable. Yet beneath the terror burned something new, resolve forged in the crucible of motherhood. She would not let Caleb rewrite Hazel's story. Not while she still drew breath. When Lydia pulled into the lot across from Sunshine Cafe, the first thing she saw was Hazel in the sandbox, blonde curls bouncing as she patted damp sand into a lopsided castle. Relief crashed over Lydia so violently she nearly sobbed aloud. Then Maya appeared, tall, elegant, dark hair pulled into a sleek bun, scooping Hazel up and hurrying her inside. Lydia crossed the street on legs that felt made of glass. Inside the private party room, Caleb waited, looking almost respectable. Pressed shirt, trimmed beard, the prison pallor replaced by a tan that suggested months under a sun lamp or perhaps construction work. "You look good, Lydia," he said, the old charm coating every syllable. "Recovery suits you." She ignored the pleasantry. "Where is she?" "Safe. Playing. Maya is wonderful with kids." He gestured to the chair opposite him. Lydia sat, spine rigid. He laid out his terms with the cold precision of a man who had rehearsed this speech for years. Supervised visitation once a week, shared custody eventually, Hazel's documents transferred immediately, so he could enroll her in school under his name. In exchange, he would keep silent about her crimes. Lydia's laughter was bitter. "You think I believe you'd stop a visitation? You'd take her and vanish." He shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. But you know what happens if you refuse." She studied his face, searching for the boy she once loved. That boy had died long ago, replaced by this calculating stranger. Memories surged. The night she discovered Maya's locket bracelet hidden in a drawer, the photo inside showing Caleb and his sister locked in an embrace that was anything but sibling-like, the nausea that followed, the way she ran to Nick for comfort and found more than comfort, the guilt that drove her deeper into pills and liquor while her pregnancy advanced. She had been drowning then, and Caleb had thrown her an anchor instead of a rope. Now he wanted to claim the child he had nearly killed in utero. Lydia felt the old shame rise, but she pushed it down. Shame was a luxury she could no longer afford. She agreed to tell Hazel he was her father, just to buy time. They walked to the playground together. When Hazel saw her mother, she sprinted across the sand and flung herself into Lydia's arms. The smell of sunscreen and pine needles on her skin was almost Lydia's undoing. Kneeling, Lydia forced the words out. "Sweetheart, this man he's your daddy too. Your first daddy." Hazel's confusion was heartbreakingly pure. "But I have Daddy Nick." "Yes. And now you have two." The child accepted it with the elastic logic of 5-year-olds. Caleb beamed. Lydia felt sick. When Hazel asked to see his pool, Lydia improvised. She would go with them to the house, see the setup, then leave. Caleb's eyes narrowed. He sensed the delay tactic, but he agreed. In the car, Hazel chattered about toys and marshmallows while Lydia sat rigid beside Caleb, every nerve screaming danger. The house loomed at the end of a cul-de-sac, larger and colder than she remembered. Inside, the playroom was a shrine to the daughter he never raised. Pink walls, stuffed animals still in their tags, a dollhouse big enough to walk into. Lydia's gaze snagged on the cabinet in the corner, the same surface where she and Nick had crossed the line years ago. Shame flared hot and immediate. Then she saw the bracelet hanging from a framed photo of Caleb and Maya. She opened the locket. The incestuous embrace stared back at her. The truth she had buried under layers of addiction roared to life. She hadn't cheated out of weakness alone. She had fled from horror. She snatched the documents and the bracelet, turned and ran. Caleb pursued. In the driveway, he slapped her so hard blood filled her mouth. Hazel screamed from the doorway. Caleb dragged Lydia inside, up the stairs, into the master bedroom. He locked the door. His hands closed around her throat again. Same grip, same rage. "You always ruin everything," he snarled. Lydia fought, nails raking his arms, knee driving into his groin. He staggered. She lunged for the door. He caught her ankle, yanked. She hit the carpet hard. He grabbed the baseball bat. Sirens wailed in the distance. Hazel had dialed 911 from the kitchen phone, voice tiny but steady. "My mommy need help. The scary man is hurting her." Police burst in moments before the bat descended. Caleb and Maya were tackled in the garage as they tried to flee with Hazel. Lydia was loaded into an ambulance, skull throbbing, vision blurring. In the hospital, she woke to the steady beep of monitors and Hazel's small hand in hers. Nick sat beside them, eyes red. "She saved you," he whispered. "Our brave girl called for help." Lydia wept, relief, guilt, gratitude crashing together. When the detectives arrived, she confessed everything. The embezzlement, the lies, the fear that kept her silent. She expected handcuffs. Instead, Detective Wilson said quietly, "Rehabilitation matters. Tell the truth now, and the court will see it." Lydia looked at Hazel curled against Nick's chest and understood a deeper truth. Redemption is not the absence of mistakes. It is the courage to own them. In the quiet hours after the detectives left, while Hazel slept in the narrow hospital bed beside her, Lydia stared at the ceiling tiles and thought about karma, not as mystical payback, but as the natural consequence of cause and effect. Ancient Indian philosophy describes karma as action and its fruit. Plant good seeds, harvest good fruit. Plant poison, harvest poison. For years she had planted poison, addiction, deceit, silence, and the fruit had nearly cost her daughter everything. Yet in confessing, she had finally planted a different seed: honesty. She thought of the Tuskegee syphilis study, one of America's darkest medical crimes, where hundreds of black men were deliberately left untreated for 40 years under the guise of research. When the truth emerged in 1972, the nation recoiled, not only at the cruelty, but at the decades of lies that enabled it. Truth, delayed, still burns, but truth spoken, even late, can begin healing. Lydia understood she could no longer hide behind partial confessions. The next morning she asked for pen and paper. She wrote a full statement, not just the embezzlement, but the context, the addiction that started as self-medication for anxiety, the way Caleb's violence deepened her dependence, the shame that kept her from seeking real help sooner. She included letters from her therapist documenting 4 months of sobriety, weekly sessions, and a commitment to continued recovery. When Nick returned with coffee, she handed him the pages. "Read it. All of it. Then decide if you still want this life with me." He read in silence, tears tracking down his cheeks. When he finished, he set the papers aside and took her hands. "I already chose you. Every broken piece, every scar. We rebuild together." Those words anchored her through the difficult weeks that followed. Prosecutors filed charges. 1 count of felony embezzlement, reduced from grand larceny because of restitution she had quietly made years earlier through anonymous payments. The judge, Noting her rehabilitation and the extreme coercion she faced, sentenced her to 18 months probation, 200 hours community service, and mandatory continued therapy. No jail time. Caleb and Maya faced far harsher consequences: kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and, after DNA evidence confirmed their sibling relationship, incest-related charges from prior investigations that had stalled for lack of proof. The court terminated Caleb's parental rights permanently. Hazel would grow up knowing only one father, the man who stayed. Lydia began her community service at a women's shelter, teaching recovery classes to mothers fighting the same demons she once faced. She spoke openly about shame, about how silence protects the abuser more than the victim, about how truth, however painful, is the only path to real freedom. One evening, after a particularly raw session, a young mother approached her. "I keep thinking if I tell my story, I'll lose my kids." Lydia placed a gentle hand on her arm. "I thought the same thing. But hiding almost cost me mine forever. The truth doesn't always feel safe, but it is the safest place to stand." The woman cried. Lydia held her. In that embrace, she felt the first true absolution, not from a court, not from Nick, but from within. She had become the person she once needed, someone who listens without judgment, who believes without hesitation, who stays. Years later, on the anniversary of that terrifying day, Lydia sat with Hazel, now 9, on the back porch swing, watching fireflies rise like tiny lanterns from the grass. Hazel had grown tall, her blonde curls replaced by long straight hair she refused to cut. She asked questions now, thoughtful ones. "Why did that man want to take me?" Lydia answered honestly, age-appropriately. "He thought he loved you, but he didn't know how to love safely. Sometimes people hurt because they've been hurt and they pass that pain on unless they choose to stop." Hazel considered this, then said, "I'm glad you stopped him." Lydia kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad you stopped him too, brave girl." They rocked in silence, the swing creaking softly. Lydia thought of Burke and Hare, the 19th century body snatchers who murdered to supply medical schools with cadavers, an extreme example of how desperation can twist morality. She thought of the Nuremberg trials, where Nazi doctors were forced to confront the human cost of their experiments. She thought of modern organ trafficking rings that still prey on the vulnerable, stealing lives under the guise of salvation. All these threads wove into the same lesson: when we dehumanize others, even one person, we erode our own humanity. The antidote is fierce, unflinching love, for others and for ourselves. Lydia no longer took pills. She took walks, wrote in her journal, spoke at recovery meetings. She and Nick renewed their vows on a quiet beach at sunrise, Hazel scattering petals. The ring Nick slipped on her finger bore an engraving inside: "Choose again." Every morning she did. She chose honesty over secrets, courage over fear, presence over escape. To anyone reading her story, she would say this: "Your past does not own you unless you let it. The moment you speak its name aloud, you begin to loosen its grip." Recovery is not a straight line. It is a spiral, each loop higher, wider, closer to light. And if you ever doubt your worth, remember the little girl who picked up a phone and saved her mother's life. That same courage lives in you. What will you choose today? The deepest scars do not vanish. They become part of the map that guides us home. Lydia understood this as she watched Hazel blow out 9 candles on a cake shaped like a campfire, her daughter's favorite memory from the trip that nearly ended everything. The frosting was chocolate, the candles bright orange, and the room filled with laughter from grandparents, friends, and neighbors who had stood beside them through the aftermath. Lydia no longer hid the story. She told it carefully, when Hazel asked, turning pain into a compass for empathy. She explained addiction not as moral failure but as a disease that warps perception. She explained blackmail as the coward's weapon. She explained courage as the decision to act even when every instinct screams run. Hazel listened, asked questions, hugged her mother tighter. In school, she drew pictures of families with 2 daddies, one who stayed and one who left, and her teacher praised her honesty instead of censoring it. Lydia volunteered at the same shelter every Tuesday, teaching English to immigrant women alongside recovery principles. She explained idioms, turn over a new leaf, face the music, get back on the horse, and tied each one to real-life victories. One student, Maria, arrived with a black eye and a toddler clinging to her skirt. After 3 months, she told her story to the group. When she finished, Lydia stood and hugged her. "You just turned over a new leaf," she said. Maria smiled through tears. "And I will keep getting back on the horse." Those words echoed in Lydia's heart long after the meeting ended. She began writing a memoir, not for fame, but for the women who believed their mistakes disqualified them from love. The working title was The Selfie That Saved Us. In it, she wove philosophy and history, Frankel's logotherapy, the resilience of World War II resistance fighters who chose meaning over despair, the ethical horrors of the Tuskegee experiment that remind us silence equals complicity. She wrote about modern parallels, illegal organ trade that exploits refugees, domestic violence that hides behind closed doors, recovery communities that offer second chances when society offers judgment. Each chapter ended with a question for the reader. What truth are you still afraid to speak? What seed are you planting today? The book found its audience quietly. Women in shelters, therapists' waiting rooms, online recovery forums. Letters arrived by the dozen. One woman wrote, "I told my husband about the money I stole 15 years ago. He cried, then held me. We start counseling next week. Thank you for showing me that truth can be a beginning instead of an end." Lydia framed the letter and hung it above her desk. At night, she and Nick still talked, deep, honest conversations about triggers, boundaries, dreams. They taught Hazel about consent, about boundaries, about trusting her own voice. When nightmares came, and they still did, Lydia held her daughter and whispered, "You are safe. You are loved. You are enough." Those words were medicine for both of them. On quiet evenings, Lydia sat alone with her journal and wrote one sentence she had once believed impossible. "I forgive myself." Not because the past was erased, but because she had stopped letting it define her future. Forgiveness, she learned, is not forgetting. It is refusing to carry the weight any longer. She looked at the swing where she and Hazel had sat years before, now weathered but still sturdy. Fireflies still rose from the grass, still carried light into the dark. And she understood that this, the ordinary beauty of an ordinary night, was the real victory. Not perfection, not a spotless record, but presence. Wholehearted, sober, honest presence. To anyone still fighting their own shadows, she would offer this final truth. The bravest thing you will ever do is not slay the dragon. It is deciding the dragon no longer gets to write your story. You do. What chapter will you write next? Have you ever chosen truth over comfort, even when the cost felt unbearable? What happened when you did?